All right, so that was the rapturous welcome that was accorded to the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who has touched down in the United States for a 3-day visit. From the Philadelphia International Airport, he's just reached the DuPont Hotel in Delaware. Now, on his way, he also met and greeted the waiting members of the Indian diaspora who had in fact turned up to come get a glimpse of the Indian Prime Minister. And this is the manner in which he, of course, interacted with the members. He waved at them and also wrote a few notes on some of the paintings and poems and other stuff that the people, the members of the Indian diaspora, had got for the Indian Prime Minister. Now, the Indian Prime Minister also has a special diaspora event that is planned in New York in the later part of the trip. Remember, Delaware is the American President Joe Biden's hometown, and this is where both leaders will be sitting down for a bilateral meeting at 10:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time. That's roughly another half an hour's time from now. Both leaders are expected to discuss regional issues and topics of mutual interest. Right after which, the Quad Summit will commence. At the summit, India, Australia, Japan and the United States have come together with an aim to support an open, free and an inclusive Indo-Pacific. The leaders are expected to review the progress achieved by the Quad over the past year and then set the agenda for the year ahead. Now, India, of course, will be hosting the Quad leaders next year. The summit is going to be followed by an intimate dinner hosted by President Joe Biden. Also on the agenda is the United Nations Climate Action Summit. The Indian Prime Minister will be addressing the Summit of the Future of the UNGA. The theme of the summit is multilateral solutions for a better tomorrow. The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called this a once-in-a-generation United Nations summit. And on the sidelines of the summit, the Indian Prime Minister will be holding bilateral meetings with several world leaders and will discuss issues of mutual interest. So this, of course, is a big visit and an important visit by the Indian Prime Minister to the United States. It's a 3-day-long visit, and the first meeting, of course, that the Indian Prime Minister will have is a bilateral meeting with the American President Joe Biden. And these are the scenes from a little while back where the Indian Prime Minister met and also greeted many of those people who'd been waiting for many hours to just get a glimpse of the Indian Prime Minister as he, of course, touched down in the United States. There was a lot of color, a lot of cultural activities that were also held. People who turned up with dances, many of these cultural festival sort of an atmosphere that the Indian Prime Minister witnessed as he met and greeted the members of the Indian diaspora. And my colleague Susan Terani is, of course, joining us live from Delaware, the place where the action is, of course, taking place at the moment. Susan, this is a pretty big visit. We've been talking about how crucial this visit by the Indian Prime Minister is, who's going to be in the United States for the next 3 days. He will be meeting the American President Joe Biden roughly in another 25 odd minutes from now. So tell us what is expected when the two leaders meet.
Well, the two leaders have a lot to talk about and also play on, considering the fact that they're pretty close. They've met a number of times. And of course, Prime Minister Modi, since 2014, has made about 9 visits to the United States here. So the cooperation between the two countries will no doubt outlast President Joe Biden. Nonetheless, right now, the conflict in Russia and Ukraine is on top of both leaders' minds, considering the fact that Prime Minister Modi visited both countries. They will talk about that, but also, you know, just a prelude to the Quad as well, what the Quad wants to talk about, which is a safe and secure, free for all Indo-Pacific region, and of course, counterbalancing China in the region as well. Now, how these two leaders plan to do this is by maritime cooperation and expanding security, expanding economic cooperation as well. And of course, we can't underestimate the bilateral defense relationship that the United States and India have together. And of course, you talked about the Indian-American diaspora. People-to-people relations is so important right now. About 200,000 Indian students are studying here in universities across the United States because of a program that was established between the two sides. So, you know, those are issues that also will be on the agenda. Prime Minister Modi, while he will be talking about issues regarding India, he is also expected to expand on the people-to-people dialogue as well.
Absolutely, indeed. And also, Susan, tell us a bit about this Quad Cancer Moonshot initiative that's going to figure pretty prominently in the Quad Summit this time around.
Yeah, this is an initiative that's very close to President Biden's heart, considering the fact that, well, personally, his son, who was Attorney General of Delaware, incidentally, Beau Biden died from cancer a few years ago. And he made this Moonshot Cancer Initiative really a cornerstone of his presidency, wanting to eradicate cancer. When it comes to the Indo-Pacific region, notably in the smaller islands and poorer countries, cervical cancer among women is very common. That's something specifically that the Quad leaders want to talk about and find initiatives with. And the way that they're going to cooperate with each other is the United States is going to establish screening bases. And then India, of course, is going to help with vaccination, notably HPV vaccines, which is to prevent a sexually transmitted disease, which is the prelude to cervical cancer. Japan is going to provide the technology, and of course, Australia is going to cooperate economically as well. Australia has a very ambitious plan to eradicate cervical cancer by 2025. So it's very important for Albanese as well as he leaves office. So that's the Moonshot Cancer Initiative, which here in the United States will get a lot of attention. But we can't underestimate that they are going to talk about countering China's influence and aggressive moves on the one hand and tensions over the Taiwan Strait on the other when they meet later tonight. I'm standing in front of this river. A little bit over to my left will be where the Quads will meet, and that is President Joe Biden's former Catholic high school.
Right.
So that's where the Quad meeting is, a reception is going to take place. Of course, the bilaterals are at President Biden's personal home.
Absolutely, indeed, Susan. There's a lot that, of course, still needs to be talked about. Thank you very much, though, for the time being, for joining us and getting us all that perspective. They will, of course, come back to you as this story develops through the evening. And also, we're being joined by Mr. Edward P. Joseph, who is a senior fellow at the Johns Hopkins University. He's joining us on this broadcast. Mr. Joseph, this is a crucial visit by the Indian Prime Minister. He's, of course, there to attend the Quad Summit. Tell us what, of course, can be expected.
The focus, of course, with the Quad is going to be on this increasing security alignment. That is the primary purpose of the Quad, and where India figures in most prominently is in its increasing acceptance and willingness to participate with its Quad partners, the United States, Japan, and Australia, on security cooperation. And the centerpiece of this Quad Summit on security will be increased maritime security. As your colleague Susan Tehrani gave in that comprehensive report, the focus is going to be on this program to enhance the maritime security and to cooperate, actual cooperation, exchange of sailors on various ships in the South China Sea, for example, on U.S. Coast Guard vessels, and as well to increase technical and technological cooperation in the security realm. Please.
Right. Now, the Quad, of course, is not a military alliance. It is more in the nature of a grouping of nations. The four nations, the United States, India, Japan and Australia. One of the objectives, of course, to in some ways take on the belligerent rise of China. In your assessment, how successful do you think the Quad has been in its objectives?
I think it's quite successful. And again, this is the point here why it's a U.S. Coast Guard vessel and not a naval vessel, Mohammed, to underscore your point about the nature of the alliance. But it's a significant piece here is really India and Prime Minister Modi and his willingness, recognizing, as you suggest, China's increasing aggressive moves in the region, in the South China Sea. India itself has serious concerns from Chinese aggression on their own border. So this point has not been lost on India. India remains a key player in this, and the increasing willingness to have active cooperation, operational cooperation, in addition to the technological, is quite significant. Separately, India and the United States will continue to expand their bilateral ties. There'll be discussions there led by President Biden and Prime Minister Modi on cooperating in space and having an Indian astronaut join a mission to the International Space Station. So this is all about a significant improvement in tightening, expanding relations between the United States and India and this wider Quad arrangement, and that in Beijing and in Moscow, I should also add, is not good news at all. And that will definitely be a concern and not taken as any type of encouragement for President Xi Jinping of China. Please.
All right, we'll have to leave that. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Joseph, for joining us and getting us that perspective then. For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.